What does it mean to live in paradise while carrying the unseen scars of nuclear fallout? How do you protect your culture and livelihood if it's under constant threat of a ballistic missile attack? And when will generations of Guamanians who unknowingly lived as downwinders of America's nuclear testing be compensated for the suffering they've endured? This is the story of Guam's nuclear victims, where history, survival, and geopolitics collide. I speak with atomic war veteran and founder of the Pacific Association for Radiation Survivors, Robert Celestial. Between 1946 and 1958, the United States detonated 67 nuclear tests in the Marshall Islands. The impacts are still being felt today. Radiation reached Guam, a US territory in the Pacific. While Washington compensated the Marshallese, Guam survivors have never been acknowledged. Today, the remaining cancer survivors are still pleading for justice. I'm Elisha Foon, journalist, storyteller, and I believe everyone you walk past has a story, and that story could change your life. So let's crack it open to discover the news in you. Guam is the largest of the Mariana Islands, part of Micronesia. It sits between the Philippines and Hawaii, making it one of the most strategically important places in the world. Often called the tip of America's spear, it's also more than 6,000 miles away from Washington, D.C. I visited Guam in 2024. It was a life-changing trip that opened my eyes to the harsh realities many of its people face today. I was on assignment, reporting on the island's rapid military buildup, an expansion so intense that a former US governor warned it mirrored the scale of growth that hadn't been seen since World War II. I investigated this military buildup and spoke with Guamanians, the island's people, and with Chamorros, their indigenous community, whose roots run deep in the Pacific. They shared stories of resilience, culture, and the daily tension of living at the crossroads of Pacific identity and American power. This tension isn't new. Guam's history is marked by conquest and survival. During World War II, Japan invaded the island in 1941, occupying it for nearly 3 brutal years. Chamorros endured forced labor, displacement, and violence until US forces recaptured Guam in 1944 and never let go. While some people called the US claiming Guam as liberation, others see it as occupation. And what followed was the transformation of the island into a strategic fortress, where America's presence has defined daily life ever since. Now, nearly a third of Guam's land is under US military control, occupying 3 separate military bases on the island. Locals say there are more planes than birds, and I witnessed this during my visit. Military wash-off from planes also spilled into aquifers, contaminating the island's water supply, and it's now unsafe to drink. And the threat of war is quite literally on Guam's doorstep. A Chamorro cultural historian told me the threat of a nuclear attack was as common as a party invitation. Both North Korea and China have built missiles with Guam in their sights. One intercontinental ballistic missile is even nicknamed the Guam Killer. The Chamorros, Guam's indigenous caretakers for over 4,000 years, now face shrinking homelands and limited political rights. Though US citizens, Guam cannot vote for the president. They have one representative, with absolutely no voting power in Congress. This is an island where military expansion collides with ecological ruin, and where culture wrestles against being erased. As bases grow larger, forests fall quieter. The question lingers, whose future is really being secured? But let's start with Robert Celestial's journey, when he was first enlisted in the US Army.
When I joined the Army in 1975, I was asked to go to the Marshall Islands, a temporary duty, And my job was to help clean up 66 nuclear bombs that were detonated. And so when we got there, our first job was to scrape the islands and transfer contaminated soil to another island. And then we ended up in 1980 accomplishing it. From 77 to 1980, there was 6,000 military personnel that was there. And when I left, I got sick.
Robert couldn't shake the feeling that the health impacts he was facing had to do with the nuclear waste cleanup, and if he was to hold the government accountable, he needed proof. When Robert left, his health began to deteriorate. Bones, kidneys, skin damaged by radiation. Many of his comrades weren't so lucky. Of the 6,000 men who worked on that cleanup, less than 300 are alive today, most of them dying of cancers and tumours. The American government knew full well just how toxic it was, but prioritised the cleanup above the health of these soldiers. And later, Robert Celestial would come to discover that the testing would also impact people living on Guam.
From 1995 to 1998, I found out through the Human Radiation Experiments Advisory Committee that President Clinton asked Dr. Ruth Baden to chair to declassify all the DOD agencies, the FBI, NSA. So that advisory committee went out, find out what other human radiation experiments they did. So when I went on the internet that time, I wanted to find out about Inuitak cleanup veterans, what happened to us. And then I found out that through their website, it was called the HREX, Human Radiation Experiments. So for about 3 years, I downloaded information about what happened to us in Inuitak, why we were exposed, highly exposed to, like plutonium and other radionuclides like strontium and cesium. And then I found a document in there about Guam. And I said, what is Guam doing in here? Then I found out that the nuclear fallout was coming to our island and kept secret. And so I found Lieutenant Bert Shriver from Texas, he was the biological, chemical, radiological officer here on the island in 1952. And when I called him, so he gave me a sworn testimony. And in his sworn testimony that was notarized, basically said in November 3rd in 1952, he was here on Guam. And his Geiger counters that detects radiation was going off the scale, and high levels of radiation was being detected here on our island. And so he wanted to tell his commander, but his commander said, no, go back to your workstation. You can't say anything about it. So back then, he kept it secret since 1952 to the time I contacted him. I wrote a 4-page report to my leaders here in Guam, the governor, the legislature, and to our delegate at that time. And so no one was basically listening to what we were saying. And so we formed the Pacific Association for Radiation Survivors. And basically all of them were either cancer survivors or their families. And so we proceeded to go forward. And what had happened is that in 2001, Radiation Exposure Compensation Act was amended. And then I found that out that their program compensated downwinders, anyone there in states like Arizona, Nevada, but they were included in a compensation to pay individuals that were exposed to nuclear fallout or uranium mining. So from then, I found out later that in 2002, Congress passed another bill and to go out nationwide, find out what other geographical areas to include in the program. That was the program was enacted in 1990 to compensate these individuals. So in 2004, I contacted Dr. Isap Nabusi from the prayer committee and asked her if they could come to Guam. She said that they don't have the funds, so I'd have to fly out with the doctors to go before the National Academies of Science and present our case with the other states like Montana, Idaho, New Mexico. So we did, and I presented our case before the National Academy of Science, with declassified documents, with sworn testimony of Bert Shriver. And so in 2005, they published the report to Congress. And in the report, it says, yes, Guam did receive measurable fallout from the nuclear testings in the Pacific, and the residents of Guam during that time period should be included in RECA as downwinders. So that was a conclusion from the scientists, and they recommended, and they even have graphs in there of Guam being higher rates of strontium than those states that were exposed to nuclear fallout.
For years, the US government tried to bury its nuclear testing legacy. Unclassified documents released under the Clinton administration revealed an ugly truth about the bombings at Bikini Atoll in the Pacific. Fallout had spread all the way to Guam, contaminating food, soil, and water. Robert realized it wasn't just veterans who suffered. Ordinary Guamanians had unknowingly lived as downwinders of America's nuclear testing. In 2002, he formed the Pacific Association for Radiation Survivors. Since then, he's fought tirelessly for recognition and compensation.
And over the years, when I finally got my medical retirement, it was like basically just taking care of myself and my family. And so when I came back to Guam, it really never hit me or dawned on me that our people were suffering also, until I found out the information that was declassified in 1994. And then I pursued it and found out that it was more difficult trying to convince people here in Guam what had happened, because people were saying they wouldn't do that to us. And then I was ostracized in the media saying, don't listen to this guy. He's not, putting out the right information, which I was. And so when the National Academies of Science finally came out with their conclusion in 2005, that's when our leaders jumped on board and said, okay, we better start listening to what I've been saying. And then I found out that we had a high rate of cancers here in Guam. And that's where our nonprofit organization came to fruition. And we said, wow, there's more people suffering and had died over the many years. And so they were even in shock that something like this would happen to them.
The US has a law called the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, also known as RECA. It pays $100,000 to people exposed to nuclear fallout, including in states like Utah, Idaho, and New Mexico. Despite scientific evidence showing Guam was hit harder than some of those states, Guam has been excluded from RECA. In 2018, Robert took his fight to the Capitol in Washington, D.C., where he testified before Congress, standing along other survivors from different states in America who had also suffered the impacts of nuclear testing.
We went before the Capitol. We did our conference with all the different medias there and testified with the other states, from like Tony Henderson from Idaho, Tina Cordova from New Mexico. We presented our case for each their state and my territory.
And they were doing tests on us because when I got back to Fort Benning, my whole body turned with like boils and red all over. And a good friend of mine, he was a bulldozer operator, and he's had 6 cancers, and he asked me to speak for him, and that he is going through chemotherapy right now in Maine.
We really felt great that Senator Crapo was going to get us into the radiation exposure compensation program, but it never came to fruition. So over the years, we waited with so many bills introduced and denied. And finally, Senator Hawley came in 2022 and started pushing for Missouri because of the Oppenheimer movies that were shown there in Washington, D.C., that they found out that Missouri had toxic waste dumped in their backyard. And so he started fighting for his state. And so we were all clumped in with the other states, Idaho, Utah, New Mexico, uranium miners, and Guam.
More than 2 decades later, survivors are still waiting. Many are forced to leave the island for proper healthcare or die without treatment. How is it that billions of dollars are spent militarizing Guam, while survivors of nuclear fallout struggle to afford chemotherapy? The extension to the United States Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, or RECA, was part of Trump's Big Beautiful Bill passed by Congress. Downwinders' compensation eligibility would extend to the entire states of Utah, Idaho, and New Mexico. Despite being included in an earlier version of the bill, Guam was excluded, taken out last minute. leaving Robert and survivors of the fallout heartbroken and devastated.
The reconciliation bill was passed. And so right now we're trying to find out what other avenues that we could present an amendment and include Guam and hopefully get Guam back into the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act. We're really frustrated here in Guam because our cancers are no different than their cancers. It's devastating. A lot of my members, are very devastated. Matter of fact, I hope and pray that they don't give up either. It's been over 20 years we've been pushing this. We've been eligible ever since 2005 with a recommendation from the National Academies of Science. We're U.S. citizens. I've served in the military. I've served our country, and we have a lot of people there from Guam. I've got a lot of friends there from different states that I served with. It's a sad situation where even our delegate, Congressman Moylan, doesn't have a vote in Congress. He could vote in committee, but he can't vote, and we have to lobby harder than most people. I had to lobby for Senator Crapo to get us in the first place in 2018 to get an invite from him. And then I continue to have to lobby with Senator Hawley, Senator Lujan, Congresswoman Fernandez. And it's a long road. And I've learned a lot over the past years. But even though what I've learned, it's still difficult, especially with our status as a U.S. territory. It's very, very difficult to get things done in Congress. And it's kind of, it's ironic that the Marshall Islands, just renewed their compact, their SOFA, and they're getting millions of dollars because they were exposed, because of the detonation there in Marshall Islands, which, over the years have been fighting it. The issue is that we were kept secret. They knew about this way back then, that the island of Guam was being inundated with nuclear fallout, but kept secret till 1994 with the declassification. And they knew about it. And so even with being revealed for so many years, we still can't get through the door. The thing that surprised me was that Guam was in the bill twice in the Senate, but never made it to the floor in the House. And then all of a sudden, through the reconciliation bill, we were taken out, and with no explanation at all. And so that's even more hurtful than anything else.
Unlike most Americans, Guamanians can't vote for the president. They send a representative to Congress, but that seat has no real voting power. Imagine being a US citizen, paying taxes, sending your sons and daughters to serve in the military at some of the highest rates in the nation, and still having no real say in the decisions that shape your future. For people in Guam, it's a daily reminder of being part of America, yet left out of its democracy.
It's a fight every day. People that are struggling even worse than I am. And I've been in the hospital for 5 months. I basically understand a lot of their pain. Being on dialysis, I see the frustrations, the anger, it's not a good, their life has been really, really changed. My life has been changed. The people of Guam, just like the people in Utah and Arizona and Colorado, Idaho, and New Mexico that will be receiving these benefits, our people deserve the same benefits because they're going through the same, I say they're going through the same hell that they're going through. It's been a long road, and the people of Guam deserve the same compensation as those in the States. And that's where it kind of feels hurtful, knowing that we were excluded. We were exposed to high levels of radiation and weren't even told about it for many, many, many years. And then when this program came to be, that we could actually be included, and then find out that our status prevents us from being included, from not having a senator that votes, not having a delegate in Congress that votes, but still, we're American citizens and we don't have a voice.
By 2028, the US will spend tens of billions on relocating 5,000 Marines from Japan, building an integrated missile defense system, and expanding military command functions on Guam. Already, a quarter of the island is under military control. While missile testing is scheduled twice a year for the next decade, critics call it an arms race with China. Robert says the US is prioritizing military assets over its people. Radiation exposure has already affected 3 generations of Guamanians, and now survivors are asking for something simple. They're asking the US government to help with the cost of staying alive.
It destroyed my bones and my skin, but a lot of my comrades had died with multiple cancers. I was blessed. I don't have cancer. For the 6,000 of us that was there from 1977 to 80, we only know 300 of us today that are still alive. We've had a lot of our comrades die over the years with multiple cancers, tumors, and other diseases like lung disease. And so I've had kidney problems. Almost died in 2023 I was on dialysis for 5 months, but by the grace of God, I've been pretty good. They took me off it. I believe that I've been fighting this so long with my members is because we're all suffering. We're trying to make our lives as comfortable as we can, and it's very expensive. I mean, a lot of our members have to go to the States. They have to get treatment. They go to California. They go to Texas. They go to other places for specialty. They go to the East Coast. And so sometimes, they're just blessed that they have insurance. But with all the different compensable cancers that through the radiation exposure compensation program, a lot of my members qualify for this program. And so that's why we're going to continue and seek redress through Congress.
The one person standing in the way of Guam survivors is House Speaker Mike Johnson, who blocked the bill that could have included Guam and the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act.
It's been over 20 years. It is baffling why we were excluded. And so no one wants to answer the question. If we had the answer, then we could have come even with this amendment and say, hey, look, if this was you're saying we don't have the evidence, well, here's the evidence. If it was going to cost too much, our CBO score was at that time, I believe, $650 million. Missouri received $1.5 billion. Idaho received $1.4 billion under CBO. So it couldn't be of cost because Tennessee, Kentucky, and Alaska weren't even in the picture to the last minute. We've been doing this with the other states for 16 years. I've been doing it for 20. And then all of a sudden these states came in and they were put into the bill. And so that was, which is good. Include everybody, but make sure you put everybody in, and we were excluded. It's sad because we had all the evidence. The people in Guam that's suffering, we've gone through the proper protocol. We got supports from Senator Crapo, Senator Lahan, Congressman Fernandez, and Congressman Moylan was pushing it. We've been doing this quite a long time. I've been in the Senate Judiciary hearings, even with Congressman Nadler when he was the chairperson for the Judiciary in the House. We had Zoom meetings. We presented our case. So I don't understand why Guam was excluded. So if anyone there in Congress can tell us why, we'd appreciate it so we could answer their questions. I mean, he could have put the House amendments in for Guam. He could have passed the Senate bills, the 2 Senate bills that came in from Senator Josh Hawley, but he didn't. He could have spoke up for Guam and said, Guam needs to be included because here's the evidence, here's the CBO score. He could have stepped in, but why he didn't, I don't know. We were even told by our Congressman Moylan, we had a meeting prior to that, and he said that he spoke to Speaker Johnson and that he's going to get it into the Rules Committee, but it never came to pass. We have a lot of unanswered questions, and hopefully we'll get it through this time. If Congress could send billions and billions of dollars for a missile, they allocated billions and billions of dollars for upgrades for the military here in Guam. This CBO score for Guam is now $450 million, and here you're spending billions of dollars. You're talking about $8 billion for military expenses for the military here in Guam, and you can't even take care of Americans here on Guam. That's what I like to tell Congress. I said, look, there's an unequitable issue here that you're not protecting the island, you're protecting your assets. We have Air Force Base that has B-1 bombers. We have our naval station that has aircraft carriers and submarines. They're protecting that. But then when it comes to the people of Guam, that were poisoned for many, many years, and the evidence is there, you can't even get us in the bill to help the people of Guam that have been suffering for many, many years. That's what I like to tell Congress.
Robert Celestial says this fight is for Guamanians still battling cancers, still paying for treatment, and still waiting for justice. He spent the last 23 years advocating for compensation. He says although their voices don't carry a vote in Congress, their message is clear. If America can spend billions defending Guam's military bases, it can spend millions defending its people. This isn't just a policy debate. It's about whether some American lives count more than others. Thank you for listening to The News and You. Your support means the world. If you believe in the work we do at The News and You, sign up to our Patreon. It really is the best way to keep this going and be part of the Newsies community. I'd be so grateful if you can share the love by leaving a rating and review. It'll help spread these stories even further. What are your key takeaways? If this story impacted you, or even made you see the world a little differently, why not share it with your friends and family? Until next time, remember, your story matters, and there's a shared truth behind everything.